On.
I want to call the Finance and Law Subcommittee meeting to order. And could I have a roll call, please? Mr. Souza,
Present.
Mr. Fiore,
Present.
and myself, Mr. Martin, present. It's Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. First item on the agenda today is student activities. There aren't any. Second item on the agenda is a virtual opening of the transportation bid. So we now will open bid for transportation.
How many do we have, Joe?
We have one.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn this bid over to Mr. Labrie to check the documentation to see if it's in proper order. Thank you.
This is not necessarily in order, but as I find it in the document. The acknowledgement of addendum is included. This is bidder one. Bloom Transportation. Bid bond is included.
Rich, Mr. Labrie, did you say the bond is included?
I'm sorry?
I couldn't hear what you said. Did you say the bond or the bid bond is included?
Yeah, the bid bond is included.
Thank you.
Bid form 8, certificate of non-collusion is included.
The gentleman that just joined us, please mute your microphone. Thank you.
And the basis of the award, the total for year one, $8,449,645 and no cents. Our process is that I will read the bid in its entirety within the next several days. Do due diligence, which will include making sure that all I's are dotted and T's are crossed, check references and anything else we need to do. And I will formulate a recommendation to administration probably within the next week.
Well, we got to make
If you'd like copies of the bid in its entirety, please indicate so by sending an email to Brenda Moynihan. She will pass it to me. If you only want certain portions of the bid, for instance, bid form 1, which is the most common thing that people ask for, then just so indicate. I believe I probably have an electronic copy here, so we should be able to generate a copy for you relatively easily. We have any questions with regard to the bid process itself?
No one. This is not an open forum for anyone else to ask questions. Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Since there are no other bids, I would entertain a motion to refer the bid to administration for review and recommendation.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Souza.
Thank you. Motion to refer the bid to administration for review recommendation with two caveats. The first one is the consultant is to provide the finance and all the members that, through the finance and law subcommittee, a spreadsheet, with his recommendations, with all of the prices and per yellow buses, vans, special ed, whatever the associated line, and also provide a copy of the bid to all of the school committee members via hard copies. And that's my motion.
I'll second it.
Motion.
Yeah, I'll do that
The
one.
motion has been made and seconded. Before I call for a vote, are there any questions from anyone who is not on the Finance and Law Subcommittee regarding this issue? Ms. Almeida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would request that mine be sent to me electronically, please.
I'm sorry, Jody. I forgot about you. Electronically. You know what? Why don't we just change that to electronic? Just change forget about the hard copy. If we can just scan them in, or if you have a hard copy, to make them, just make them all electronic. Send it to the committee members by electronic method. That's probably the best thing.
Is that okay?
Sorry about that, Jody.
Second
Yeah,
vote.
it's fine.
Anyone else? Seeing no hands, seeing no voices. I'll call the vote. Mr. Fiore,
Yes,
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
and Mr. Martin votes yes. That takes care of item number 2 on our agenda.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Souza,
Yeah, I think we're done with the bid items. The rest of the people that are on here for the bid, why don't we just take a moment and Mr. Jakes can clear the board, and we'll continue on with our meeting.
All right, so those of you can leave on your own, or I'll knock you out here in a minute. Yeah, just give them a minute. They're leaving on their own, Dave.
Hold on. Your good record.
thank you.
You betcha. Thank you. Very much.
Looks good.
Should be all set, buddy.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we're all set.
Souza? Are we back, Mr. Jakes?
Yep, you should be all set. Everyone else is gone.
All right, next item on the agenda is a FY21 quarter number 2 budget update. We have a line item, we have a revolving, and we have grant items for discussion if necessary. Anyone on the subcommittee have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, can we just have Ms. Moynihan go through the line item if she has any concerns? Right now, I don't really have any questions. If she wants to just point out any potential issues or anything.
Ms. Monahan?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Martin. So if you look at the line item budget, I do want to say that as of right now, we are currently about 34% that we have expended through our budget, as you see the left figure at the bottom. And the other things that you may look at that may be alarming or something like why we do not have a certain percentage. So if you look at the first one if you're looking at that last column, and the first budget line that has no percentage of being expended, that would be 2415, other instructional services and libraries. Please remember that we went ahead, and since we did not have libraries, we made a $0 amount of budget. But as we go ahead throughout this school year, we are purchasing items for the areas that may not have an allotment of budgeted dollars. So for that way, and as you know, every year around the third quarter, we will ask to go ahead and balance our line items. So if you look at any of the ones that have a blank percentage, that will be because we had $0 appropriated to that line item. And then another thing, let's see, if you do look at all of our percentage expended, you will see that we're pretty much on task with where we should be, because we are at quarter 2, which is 50% of our budget, and none of our line items truly do look like they have had any specific amounts that are a lot more than we expected. Again, except some of those where they have the blank percentage. Any questions on the line item?
No, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I know Mr. LeBrie is about to leave, but I did have a concern why we only had one bid. So I think that also plays into a little bit of the mix on why we only had one bid. That's a concern, considering I thought we would at least get two bids. I forgot to say that during that portion of the agenda. I apologize. If you want to speak to him privately, or if he has any, thoughts on that, that would be good to hear at some point in the either now or in the future.
Jake did right out there. Mr. LeBrie is going to be here for the extent of our meeting, so for our finance and law. So if we want to ask him questions at the end, that's up to you. I don't know. And of course, it's up to
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Moynihan. I concur with your thoughts on that. I understand what you're saying. And as far as the revolving, right now we're in pretty good shape, it looks like.
Right. If you're looking at our revolving accounts, right now we have about $4 million in our revolving accounts. And again, just so you are aware, school choice expenditures are being reviewed by FEMA, and for FEMA reimbursement, we are still waiting to hear from the city, as they have submitted the items that I sent over to the city to have FEMA reimbursement. So they are reviewing that, and I will keep the committee updated as soon as I do hear something. So again, for our revolving, we look like we're in very good shape. And any questions on the revolving?
No. Mr. Fiore?
Mr. Fiore,
Well, I had a question or comment. You mentioned about zeroing out library item, but I have discussed with Mr. Cabral privately a couple of times that the libraries from Hopewell and Old Mulcahy are still sitting in boxes at New Mulcahy. The books haven't been shelved, and faculty have actually been going out and buying their own books because they haven't had access to books that they normally would have. And Mr. Cabral was going to speak with you about arranging for some short-term help to be able to at least get those books shelved. So I did want to follow through on that.
Mr. Fiore, I will meet with Mr. Cabral. I know that Mr. Cabral and Mr. Barada were setting up some help to help put the books on the shelves at the New Mulcahy, but I will follow up with Mr. Cabral and Mr. Barada and report back to the committee.
Thank you.
Sure.
any other questions regarding the line item budget, the revolving accounts, or the grants?
No, I'm all set. Receive and placed on file.
Second?
Motion's made second on a roll call. Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Mr. Martin votes yes. Let's see, next item on the agenda is bills payable. We have one bills payable, but it's over 2 years. So for FY20, we have $2,085. And for FY21, we have $628,254.02. For a total bills payable in the amount of $630,339.02. Mr. Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Moynihan, page 18, Granger.
Page 18. Okay, page 18, Ranger, for $6,200. That's coming out of the Perkins grant, and that is because they purchased some tables for the classrooms.
Is that because of COVID to spread the people out more?
No, I believe it is something for the Chapter 74 program, because that is coming from the Perkins grant. So that would be affiliated right to Chapter 74 program.
That's right, because it would come out of the CARES Act. Okay. Page 14, Square Locker. I'm not sure what this is because I don't remember it, to be honest with you, because there's athletics and there's also custodian supplies on there. Could you just explain that? And some is the regular budget and the other one is a grant. Not a grant.
Yeah.
It's coming out of a revolving. I'm sorry.
So what we have for Squad Locker, there are a few, you are correct. We have athletic uniforms that we did purchase for our students. So they are considered uniform shirts for our custodians. We've used Squad Locker in the past. And then the rest of the items, and those custodian shirts, please know that those are for our sub-custodians because our regular custodians do receive a stipend for their uniform, but our sub-custodians, we do provide them with some t-shirts so that they feel that they are part of the team and our school. So that's what's purchased that way. And then the other items, again, like I said, are considered to be athletics uniform purchases.
So Squad Locker is a clothing outfit, basically.
Yes, we do have.
That was the short answer I was looking for. Thank you. I just didn't remember that. Could you just go to one more thing? Page seven, lifespan school. Where is that? Is that tuition for 2 kids for 1 month or?
It is considered it's tuition for 1 student for 2 months of October and November.
It says out of state. Where do you know how far out?
Correct. It's an out-of-state school tuition for 1 student.
Do we know where?
I don't have the location, but I'll be happy to reach out to special ed and they will provide that to me and I will provide that to the committee as well.
Just curious. I think they're just curious on that. When you get a chance, no rush. Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval on the warrant bills payable in the amount of $630,339.02. Thank you, Ms. Moynihan. Appreciate your attentiveness on this.
I'll second. I find the warrant in order.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, Mr. Fiore,
Yes,
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Martin votes yes. Last item on the agenda is facilities update, and I'll turn that over to Ms. Moynihan.
As we have been doing in the past, the quick facilities update, we are providing PPE for our students and staff and continuing with constant sanitizing and cleaning of our schools. And you have seen that our schools are deep cleaning on Wednesdays, but again, that doesn't stop many of our custodians to deep clean on other days as well. And that's it.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Fiore.
Mr. Fiore had his hand up.
yes, I know that crew was supposed to come in and work on the heating at Mulcahy today. Do we have any progress on that?
Yes, they have been working in the ceilings on there. I spoke to Principal Dakuda this afternoon, and she did provide me that they were in first ceiling and her room was a little bit warmer. So hopefully they'll be correcting everything sometime today. She'll provide us with an update later on today. Oh, I believe Mr. Cabral has something as well.
Yeah, and if I can just follow up and add to that. So I also will be attending, or Mrs. Moynihan and I will be attending a meeting later this week to listen to the HVAC technicians so that we can learn what is the root cause of the heating concerns and what is the timeline for the repairs as we are well into winter. Good question, Mr. Fiore. Thank you.
Tell them at this rate we won't sign off on the building till I'm retired.
Anything else on the facilities?
Nope.
Motion to accept the report would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes,
and Mr. Martin votes yes. That's the last item on the agenda. Mr. Souza, you have your hand up.
Yep. So I'm just again, I want to go back to the transportation bid openings, and one bid disappointing. 2 bids is not bad. 3 bids is great, but 1 bid is disappointing. Did we have any insight that this was going to happen, or I mean, we didn't know it till the final day, till the bids would be in. Till the bids closed, but we had a lot of interest. I thought all those people were bidders at the rate they were coming in. We had 8 or 9 people on the Zoom, and then we had 1 bidder. So I'm just kind of curious on any thoughts on that.
I only heard from 1 bidder prior to the bid opening, and he indicated he was not bidding. The reason being is that he was successful in obtaining a new contract on the South Shore, and he was unsure whether he could get enough drivers for this contract, so he was not going to bid. My presumption is that two of the other bidders are union bidders. Their drivers are either Teamsters or UFCW contracted drivers, and they could not be competitive with Bloom, who is predominantly a non-union company.
I see.
When I do my due diligence, I will follow up with several of them to see why they did not bid. As you saw today, not only did we have 7 bidders at the virtual bidders meeting, but we had, I think, 5 of those 7 who attended the bid opening, even though they did not bid.
So they're still, they still have a little interest anyway.
That it is.
Thank you, Mr. Labrie. I appreciate that explanation. That settles a lot of thoughts in my mind about, this time of the year, this bid, and where we may head with it. But I'm looking forward to your report.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Motion, we adjourn.
Second,
Motion made second, Mr. Fiore,
yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes,
and Mr. Martin votes yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, Steve.
thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I call the meeting to order, and Mrs. Fagan, if you could please start us off with the prayer and the call to order. The roll
Certainly,
call.
thank you. Lord, as we begin this session, let us acknowledge your goodness and mercy and ask your blessings on all our deliberations. We thank you for this opportunity to be of service to our community and to the young people entrusted to our care. On a roll call, Ms. Doherty,
Present.
Mr. Pulowski,
Present.
Mr. Fiore,
Present.
Mrs. Fagan's present, Mr. Martin,
Present.
Mrs. Almeida,
Present.
Mr. DeMello,
Present.
Mr. Souza,
Present.
Mayor O'Connell.
Present. Thank you. Approval of the minutes of December 16th and January 6th, 2021.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Are we doing procedural on a voice vote?
On the minutes, be better.
I'm sorry?
On the minutes, be better on this one.
Voice or roll call?
Roll call.
Okay. On a roll call vote, please, Mrs. Fagan.
Ms. Doherty,
Yes.
Mr. Pulowski,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Fagan votes yes. Mrs. Almeida, Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida,
Yes.
Mr. DeMello,
Yes.
and Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have a student representative here this evening?
I don't see one.
No, I don't see one. Okay, so we will pass that one by. And it is public input. Mr. Souza?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Wednesday, January 20th, 2021, Taunton School Committee meeting. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Section 3818, and Governor Baker's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Taunton School Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this public hearing will be held remotely with no physical meeting location. Those seeking to provide public input should do so using the following methods listed below. The meeting will be aired live on the Taunton Educational Network, Comcast 9, Verizon Channel 23 in Taunton. The meeting can also be viewed via live stream at the THS TV Studio Castis account. A recording of the meeting will be made available at the aforementioned THS TV Studio Castis website, as well as the Taunton Educational Network YouTube channel. And that's on YouTube as the THS TV Studio. It will also be rebroadcast multiple times on the Taunton Educational Network cable channel. Public input via the telephone live during the meeting, and then the number should be posted up on the screen, is 508-821-1221. Leave a voicemail if necessary, include your name and number for the record. And remember, you have to provide your name and number when you're calling in or via email. Public input via email prior to the meeting start is wdevine@tauntonschools.org. Using the email subject line, public input, include your name and address for the record. The meeting will be recorded and posted on the Taunton Public Schools website at www.tauntonsschools.org. And I know we have 2 email public inputs. And Ms. Moynihan, do we have any phone inputs yet? What we're going to do
As
is,
of right now, we do
No.
not have any phone calls.
okay, we're going to go to the 2. We're going to go to Mr. Barata for the 2 public input emails, and then we'll move to the phone call. So if you want to call in, remember it's 508-821-1221. Mr. Barata, welcome, and please read the 2 emails.
Thank you, Mr. Souza and members. I'll read the emails in the order that they were received. We hope this is first communications from James Quaintance, President of the Taunton Education Association. We hope this message finds you well. As I am sure many of you have seen on social media platforms, there is a much chatter about schools being remote or schools being hybrid. Much of this chatter mentions the TEA insisting that this district go full remote. Most of the discourse is polite and well-intentioned, but not all. Our members have done a great job of ignoring the negativity and not engaging in these posts. Attached is a message we posted on our Facebook page last night that addresses the situation in general, but also specifically addresses one Facebook post by City Councilor Christopher Coit, where he calls our actions racist. That is offensive and unacceptable coming from an elected official. The TEA Board of Directors unanimously approved this message on Tuesday. We are sending the letter directly to you so there is no confusion, and we would like it read as public input at your next school committee or city council meeting. Thank you, James Quaintance. And here is the response. Dated January 14th, 2021. On March 13th, 2020, a robocall went out from Superintendent John Cabral that would set off a cataclysmic change in the way we educate our children that would continue for months and continue to this day. We think it's fair to say that none of us expected that the COVID-19 pandemic would continue to drastically alter the way we operate for months to come. The Taunton Education Association worked tirelessly with Superintendent and the school committee to develop a plan to deliver instruction to our students throughout the closure last spring. It was not an easy task. We were being asked to develop a plan for something none of us had ever done before, and it needed to be done quickly. The resulting plan was without a doubt flawed and imperfect. But when we realized that the plan must become a long-term plan, we did what any good builders do. We went back to the drawing table and worked to create a new plan. A plan that would better serve the students of our city while keeping the school committee and Taunton community at large safe. The agreement between the school committee and the Taunton Education Association stated that the schools would go full remote after 3 weeks of being red or high risk. We reached that benchmark on December 3rd. Our expectation was a normal one, that the agreement would be honored and the district would go full remote. This was not something the TEA tried to unilaterally force the district to do. It was already agreed upon back in the fall. Our only expectation was that the language, which is very clear, would be honored. This has undoubtedly been a difficult time for members of our community, the nation, and the world as a whole. The impact of the pandemic reaches well beyond health. It impacts families financially and emotionally as well. We understand for many people, the status of the schools is an incredibly important issue. Together, we worry about the impact of the closure on all our students, not just their education, but also their mental health. Schools provide a unique service that cannot be matched anywhere. They provide more than an education. They provide a safe, caring environment where children are able to socialize, experiment, and grow. They form friendships and bonds not just with other children, but with the adults who teach and care for them every day. We also understand it is an emotionally charged issue because many people have their own jobs to go to. Many of our members who live in communities other than Taunton, and even the ones who do live in Taunton, have been impacted by the same concerns for their children as the Taunton community. We all want our children to be in school as much as possible, but we want the school community to be a safe place for everyone. The members of the Taunton Education Association have never stopped trying to do what is best for the children of Taunton since the doors closed on March 13, 2020. We were overjoyed when the first of our students returned to the building in September, and as more and more came back every week. We have been overwhelmed by the support the community has shown our members as they struggle to do their best they can in what is undoubtedly the most difficult time in their career. Your words of support, your encouragement, and your appreciation you've expressed to us has helped us stay on task during these difficult times. We've educated and cared for your children from pre-K to 12. And like you, we worry about them, all of them. We see the incredible potential each child that enters our doors has. We've chosen the career that allows us to nurture that potential and to help them become the best person they can possibly be. We strive every day, whether it is remote or in person, to help them be the best they can be. Unfortunately, there seems to be some that seek to blame the TEA for any decisions or changes that may be unhappy with. This is especially discouraging when it is an elected official who should be working with us to improve the situation, but chooses instead to vilify us by calling our actions racist. The Taunton Education Association has advocated for every child in our schools, and we care about them. And we, more than many others, realize that not every child has the same advantages and opportunities. We work every day to change that. We advocate for social justice and call on legislators to pass laws that will work to close not only the achievement gap, but the bigger and more daunting opportunity gap. We believe the doors of opportunity should be open to every child, and we're working hard to make that happen. But comments like the one by Councilor Coit are not helpful. In parentheses, quote, I would charge that any push in subsequent implementation to fully remote learning would be at a minimum tacitly racist due to known consequences of said action, end quote. Councilor Christopher Coit, December 7th, 2020. Councilor Coit's comments are hurtful and untrue. We take great offense to it. The TEA is not a racist organization, nor do we advocate for racist policies. We do the exact opposite. We want our schools to be safe. According to the metrics, Taunton is a high-risk community. But again, Councilor Coit, instead of working with us, makes it difficult for us to have a real conversation when he implies on his official city councilor page that the numbers are not real. Quote, there is talk that the city will now revert to full remote learning, within parentheses, if we can call it that, now that supposed benchmarks have been met with regard to individual COVID infection cases allegedly rising, end quote, Councilor Coit, December 7, 2020. He tacitly claims that the virus and the rising numbers are false. We ask that the agreement between the school committee and the TEA be honored. We worked with the school committee and the superintendent to come up with a plan for the current school year. It's not the TEA's plan, it's the district's plan. The numbers are real. The virus is not a hoax. We see the impact of the virus in our classrooms every day. We are not the enemy. The pandemic is our common enemy, and we can only overcome it together. We can't express enough gratitude for all the words of encouragement and appreciation the Taunton community has showered upon us. We're proud of the relationship we've always had with the community and the district, and we're proud to be educators in this city. Stay safe. The Board of Directors of the Taunton Education Association. Second communication is from Christopher Coit. James, to Quaintance. I had previously emailed to elected officials a copy of my letter and to the mayor, school committee, superintendent to be read during public input, copy attached. I would hope my letter will be read during the school committee, as I had requested on December 7th, 2020. Below is an excerpt of my letter, or from my letter. The McKinsey Institute believes that the current trend would lead to exacerbating existing achievement gaps by 15 to 20%, end quote. Our country now is addressing social and racial injustice, but the numbers here do not lie. Remote learning has a disproportionately negative influence on all students, but nowhere as negative as it is for our minority students. Let us not forget that many families use schools for services and support, including food, healthcare, and libraries. I would charge that any push in subsequent implementation to fully remote learning would be at a minimum tacitly racist due to the known consequences of said action. For clarification on my statement, the effects of remote learning are tacitly racist, which means not directly or intentionally, but it has the effect. Not teachers are the racists. The effects of remote learning are. I do not apologize for fighting for our kids, especially those that will be disproportionately affected the most by remote learning. We should all be fighting for our kids. The long-term effects of remote learning are going to be significant for many years to come. My top priority at all times is the kids, the kids, the kids. Sincerely, Christopher Coit. Now I'll read the statement that he entered in, that he asked to be read previously. Dear Superintendent and School Committee members, we are parents of 3 school-age children in the city of Taunton, and I'm writing to you today in an effort to share a perspective I believe the majority of Taunton parents have regarding the remote in-school learning models. There is talk that the city will now revert to full remote learning, if we call it that, now that supposed benchmarks have been met with regard to individual COVID infection cases allegedly rising. I'm here to say that the model as it stands now is not working. It is not helping our most prized and beloved resource, our children. In fact, I truly believe with all my heart that the negative effects from which we have burdened our children with will be felt for many, many years to come. Taking that into consideration, any talk of and subsequent implementation of fully remote learning will have dire and catastrophic consequences to our children and community. We have given these models, hybrids, or whatever you would like to call them, plenty of time. They simply do not work. Children are bored and they're not learning. It shouldn't be surprising as these systems are simply not natural or conducive to educating our children properly. I have talked to hundreds of parents who are at their wits' end due to the stresses and pandemonium these models have created. They wonder now, with the certain likelihood of having almost 2 years of remote or hybrid learning, what does the future hold for their children? What have they learned? How will they fare in high school? Will they get accepted to test schools? How will high school age children compete in comparison to their private school counterparts who have been in school the whole time when college admissions are right around the corner? What of our young children? At a time when they should be learning socialization and developing relationships and taking on new responsibilities, how far we are setting them back? What about our students of color and our children of lower economic means? I read a study where the average learning loss for students, if there is no in-school instruction, is 7 months. However, students of color may fall behind up to 10 months and low-income students of all backgrounds generally a year. The McKinsey Institute believes that the current trend would lead to exacerbating existing achievement gaps by 15 to 20%. Our country now is addressing social and racial injustice, but the numbers do not lie. Remote learning has a disproportionately negative influence on all students, but nowhere as negative as it is for our minority students. Let us not forget that many families use schools for services and support, including food, healthcare, and libraries. I would charge that any push and subsequent implementation of fully remote learning would be at a minimum tacitly racist due to known consequences of said action. Lastly, I would like to tackle the elephant in the room, teachers' unions. A more powerful union does not exist. Our children are suffering terribly due to the charade. Our children need to be the top priority, not the teachers' union. Our children's futures obviously take precedence over any attorney-drafted contracts. Everyone has gone back to work, and most, if not all, industries have taken enormous safety precautions in fighting this virus and an effort to get back to some modicum of normalcy. Why should teachers be any different? Our children are not getting sick. They are not dying. 0 persons under 21 have died in the Commonwealth due to COVID. We know through the experts we hear on radio and see on television that for some reason, children are not as susceptible to this virus. And if they happen to catch it, they don't get that sick, and they certainly do not spread it along like other demographics say. Say what you will about Dr. Fauci and his colleagues. They are not very consistent in any of the recommendations they espouse, save one, that children should be and need to be in school. They have said this from the beginning, and nothing in the numbers and transmission rate of this specific demographic, children and teachers, has changed this notion. With regard to teachers and COVID, recent statistics tell us that teachers 50 years old and under who contract the virus have a survival rate of 99.97%. Teachers 70 years and younger have a survival rate of 99.93%. Thus, we all know that the threat is this dynamic. Teachers and children interaction is extremely low. And having dealt with the virus for close to 1 year, we unequivocally know that the demographic that is most affected by this virus are our seniors and those with compromised conditions / serious pre-existing health issues, not 4th graders. So let us allocate as many services and resources possible to the groups who are truly threatened by the virus and stop using our children as chess pieces. Now, taking all this information into consideration, I stand here today and declare that I would not be hesitant to change my position and agree to a fully remote model in the event that we see a 180-degree change with these numbers. If we start seeing mass breakouts and sicknesses in schools, let us reevaluate. However, the data simply doesn't show this to be likely. Whatever your political leaning may be, you simply cannot dispute the numbers, and you simply cannot deny the harm that we are doing to our children. We need to stop this insanity now, today. Sincerely, Carrie Ann and Christopher Coit, deeply concerned parents. That concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. Barata. I appreciate you reading those. Ms. Moynihan, Do we have
There
any
are
public?
there are no calls.
I will, thank you very much. Public input will conclude after that. There is no calls. So Madam Mayor, public input has concluded. And,
Thank you, Mr. Souza.
and Madam Mayor, just to make a point, I'm going to make a motion, the other presiding officer, so I can make a motion that we go out of the regular order of business. We have a couple of guests with us, and to go to subcommittee reports and just move the special program subcommittee right now to this spot in the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, so voted. Okay, so we will go right to Special Program Subcommittee, and that is Mrs. Doherty.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. David, thank you for moving the order of business so that we can accommodate the time available to our guest, Marquise Taylor, who is the founder of Coaching for Change, and Danielle Coit, who is the principal of Friedman Middle School. Danielle is here to represent the other two principals of Martin and Parker Middle Schools as well regarding the Coaching for Change program. We, the committee, myself, Mr. DeMello and Mr. Pawlowski met last Thursday, January the 14th, with the superintendent and with Marquise to review the proposal that Marquise is making to return Coaching for Change to our middle schools. So let me start with Superintendent, and then Marquise can talk about what the new plan is, and Danielle, of course, to support bringing Coaching for Change back to the middle school. So thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. So I'll just speak very briefly about the new model that we are excited to be implementing in our 3 middle schools. What's nice about this model is that rather than taking place after school, which required transportation and also required more intensive supervision of our students, this model will take place during the school day on our remote Wednesday. So I'll let Mrs. Kurt and Marquise get into the details and the weeds regarding what is being proposed. I would also be remiss if I didn't identify that this comes at no cost to the school department. I want to reemphasize that. This comes at no cost to the school department to pilot this program, as Marquise has worked with community stakeholders, to secure funding to pilot this program in the Taunton Public Schools at our 3 middle schools. So with that said, I will turn things over to Danielle and to Marquise.
I don't want to put a damper on this, but this is a subcommittee report. So if the 2 members could just keep it, the 2 guests could just keep it very brief, because we haven't heard a recommendation from the subcommittee. So if you could just keep your comments very brief, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. I'd like to start with Marquise so he can just encapsulate the new program design, and then Danielle, if you don't mind. Thank you. Marquise?
Hi, I want to first thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to talk to you guys about what we've been working really hard to do. I also want to give a special thank you to Mayor O'Connell, Bristol County Savings Bank, and also Tom Quinn of the DA's office, who is financially supporting us and helping us come back to Taunton if you guys approve. Essentially, what we're focused in on is creating a space where college students can mentor middle school students that need extra support during the school day virtually, under the support and guidance of guidance counselors from the building. We know that right now, a lot of kids are struggling with managing stress and coping with stress. And there's also a challenge with students being engaged online. And so by connecting them with a college mentor virtually, this is a tool and a way for us to engage and get kids connected in a really special and different way through a near peer mentoring model. And we want to pilot this over the next 8 weeks. And then once we kind of understand what this looks like moving forward, make more decisions of what the rest of the school year looks like. And I'll pass it over to you, Danielle. Did I miss anything?
No, thank you all for having me here tonight as well. Marquise definitely explained it pretty thoroughly. Mr. Cabral had reached out to me a few weeks to a month ago asking if we could possibly incorporate this within our schools. As you know, many of our students are really struggling with engagement and making those connections despite our best effort. So this program, as Mr. Cabral had mentioned, isn't going to cost our Taunton Public Schools any money. So as a principal, I won't have to give up something to get this. And as another avenue to reach some of our students that are struggling, many times our students are more apt to listen to a college age peer compared to us older people. So I think it would be a great opportunity for our students to have that connection with a college mentor through the guise of a guidance counselor within our building. And I think that would be a really helpful time. Another important piece is the students would meet with the college mentors after our enrichment block in the morning. So they wouldn't be missing class time to get this extra engagement piece. So I think that's a huge point that needs to be made, because I did not want any of my students missing school time for this extra engagement piece.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. So I'll invite Mr. DeMello, Mr. Pulowski to comment if they wish.
If I may, thank you, Chair Doherty. Yeah, I mean, when we did the subcommittee meeting last week, I see no cons. I asked about pros and cons, and every question was answered. And I guess Principal Coit was, of course, key on explaining that the children are not losing class time because you don't want to not have a balance in place. So that was one of my concerns. Of course, financial burden is always a concern. And of course, we've heard from a few of us, including Marquis, that there is no cost to the district, and it's an 8-week period. So I have no issues, evaluating this over 8 weeks and see what happens after that. So I did vote in the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pulowski?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. I support this fully. I think it's a great idea. I think this is a great reinterpretation of the program in light of COVID-19. One of the major struggles that I think all teachers that you will speak to across the district is keeping these children engaged. So I think, and especially in our middle schools, bridging the gap between elementary and high school. So anything that we can do, anything outside of the box that we can do to reach out and engage the kids that are not engaging is invaluable. And I 100% agree with the fact that the same words and same phrases and ideas coming from a younger college student is going to mean a lot more to some of these kids than coming from adults. So I think this is a great opportunity for us. And as it's been said, there is no financial burden. So I see absolutely no reason not to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pulowski. And did you mention, Daniela Marquise, how many students are going to be engaged, or you imagine are going to be engaged, and how those students would be selected to participate in either case?
Sure. So we are going to be working with, each college student is going to have between 5 to 10 students that they're going to be working with the guidance counselor. They'll be identified through myself or the other two principals, as well as the assistant principals, guidance counselor recommendations, and teacher recommendations, in order to get a pool of students that we think would most benefit from the college mentor experience. And again, trying to connect kids to, again, you can go to college, you can do different things. It's another great opportunity, rather than, hey, what are you going to be when you grow up? And they have no concept of further beyond middle school or high school. So I think it's a really nice avenue to maintain that relationship with the college.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Madam,
I'm getting there, David.
as far as the subcommittee goes, we need to have a recommendation, and then we should move forward with a vote. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me. I'm getting there. The subcommittee recommends unanimously that the school committee adopt the program as recommended, bringing it back to the middle schools and I believe it's an 8-week pilot program. So that is our recommendation.
Motion to accept the report and adopt the recommendations.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the report and recommendations. On discussion, Mrs. Almeida.
Thank you. So this is an 8-week pilot program. What happens after 8 weeks?
Marquise, can you answer that question?
So we're kind of trying to figure out, or we have to wait and see what's happening with the pandemic and this extra strand. Our goal is for the students, for the program to go from virtual to in-person, where college students are no longer meeting virtually, but they are coming into the school buildings. But that all depends on the rules. So our plan is to reevaluate come week 6 of the program to see if it's even possible for it to be in person. And I think we'll reevaluate halfway through to figure out what the next steps are.
Thank you.
So is the funding for this only for 6 weeks?
No, the funding is it can carry over into next school year, but it all depends on what all of it looks like and how we're operating. So it's fully funded for the next 8 weeks, and there will be funding left over to move forward into next school year as we try and plan and navigate to figure out what's going to happen.
And so I have one more question, if I may, Madam Mayor. What part of the school day in this virtual plan are the students going to be pulled out to go into for the mentors?
I think it would be appropriate for Mrs. Kurt to answer that as a building principal.
Sure.
Sure. So when I was first initially meeting with Marquise, my #1 goal was for students not to be taken out of their academic time. So on Wednesdays, we do a lot of social emotional learning from 8:30 to 9:30. So we would think it would happen after that, continuing the social emotional learning with the college mentors. Usually students during that time would be working on missing assignments or long-term projects, so they wouldn't be missing instruction or time with their peers.
So you're saying it's only going to take place on a Wednesday?
Yep.
For the next 6 weeks?
8 weeks.
I thought I just heard 6. Okay, 8 weeks.
Well, I think it was reevaluate after 6 weeks.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Taylor, if you wanted to.
No, I was just going to say what you just said, reevaluate at the 6-week mark, but the pilot program currently for it to be virtual is 8 weeks.
You're all set,
All
Mrs.
right.
Almeida?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Fiore?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say, from my perspective, this solution is answered to prayer. The toughest things I faced in evaluating budget cuts this past year were the 2 big ticket items at the top, Coaching for Change and Taunton Area School to Career. And the only reason I gritted my teeth and allowed for the cuts is because I knew that there was a lot of private sector support for these programs, and that money might be raised somehow that would restore them. And I'm very happy to see that it happened. Mr. Taylor's program is special to me because I can actually almost see his office out of the window of my house. He's two doors down from me. We used to run into each other in the neighborhood a lot before the pandemic, and I'm happy to see them back, and I hope we can keep this going.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore. So there is a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no further discussion, we can go to a roll call vote.
Ms. Doherty,
Yes.
Mr. Pulowski,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Mrs. Fagan votes present. Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida,
No.
Mr. DeMello,
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Do you need to vote, Mayor, or are you all set?
No, there are 6 in favor, 1 present, 1 opposed. The motion passes.
Motion to go back to the regular order of business.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Marquise and Danielle, Mr. Cabral.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a great night.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Okay, we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Madam Mayor, there was a motion and a second. We just need a show of hands to move back to the regular order of business.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Motion and a second to move back to regular order of business. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, so voted. Okay, thank you, Mr. Souza. Superintendent's report?
Thank you, Madam. Making sure my volume's out. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order with my superintendent's report because I do have a PowerPoint presentation that it covers the first piece of my report. So I just want to give two quick updates. One, I just want to make the public aware, especially our families, that the Department of Public Health for Massachusetts has waived the flu vaccination requirement. So many families have been notified by our nurses at the start of the school year that there was a requirement that all students in the Taunton Public Schools and schools throughout Massachusetts receive the flu vaccination in order to continue attending in person, or was a requirement for attending school this year. That has been waived, and the reason that has been waived, there was much support from superintendents, especially urban superintendents, who felt that the flu requirement would serve as a detriment and would possibly omit or keep students out of schools if they did not receive the vaccination. So while we're happy that many students did receive the vaccination, we're happy to hear that this requirement has been lifted. And I was also very pleased to learn of the mild cases of flu, which I believe can also be attributed to the many precautions we are all taking and the many precautions and protocols we have put in our schools. So moving forward, many lessons learned that we hope moving forward in many years to come, we can implement these strategies to help mitigate the spread of flu in our schools. I also wanted to make the public and also make our school personnel aware that nurse manager Karen Regan, with support from the city, we are working very hard to secure vaccine in order to get our staff vaccinated. So there will be a survey that will be released either tonight or in the near future, where we'll be asking staff to let us know, without revealing any identifiable information, their desire to receive or not receive the vaccine, so that we can make sure we have enough vaccine on hand to safely and efficiently vaccinate all our TPS employees who wish to be vaccinated. So that's great news, and I need to tip my hat to Nurse Manager Karen Regan, our nursing staff, as well as our partners on the city side, who are working around the clock to provide our students and staff with the safest learning environment possible so that we can maintain our hybrid learning model. Two other notes that were brought to my attention this week that I didn't have a chance to put in my report. I'm not sure if the school board is aware. I think I had stated that we were anticipating the release of the governor's House 1 budget on January 20th, which is today. Mrs. Moynihan informed me through a communication she received from the Massachusetts Association of School Business Officials, MASBO, that the governor's House 1 budget will be released on January 27th. So we can expect the House 1 budget to be released on January 27th, and that will be followed, if they continue to follow the same timeline, that will be followed by the House and the Senate budgets being released in April and May respectively. So despite the fact that we've been consumed by COVID, we have been working and preparing for the FY22 budget. So myself, Mrs. Moynihan, and Mrs. Devine will be communicating with the school committee very shortly to schedule our meetings with principals, to schedule our budget workshop, and also to schedule our budget forums, which will be held remotely, not in person as they have been in the past. I also want to point out that we've been very successful and very fortunate to have a very supportive and highly engaging start to the winter sports season. So I'm pleased to announce that Mr. Ottavianelli last week had the varsity teams practicing for the winter sports season. This week, we brought back our sub-varsity teams to begin practicing, and we also launched our winter season with gymnastics playing yesterday in the meet versus Mansfield, and our girls have their first home basketball game tomorrow, which I believe Mr. Jakes will share the link as we are attempting to stream the games live to those who are interested in watching via YouTube. So the last piece of my report, Mr. Jakes, would you mind putting up the PowerPoint presentation? Because I'll speak to the PowerPoint presentation as it mirrors what's in my report. Is I want to continue the conversation with the school board regarding the work that we are doing as a leadership team to continue exploring the feasibility of pooled testing. So I believe at the last meeting, I gave you a slight overview of pool testing. So the PowerPoint presentation I'm sharing with you, I cannot take credit for developing this presentation. I've taken bits and pieces from the state presentation and that I wish to share with you. So there are 4 major players who are working very hard at the state level to provide pool testing at district levels. So I need to recognize Russell Johnson from DESE, or Lauren Wu, who I've been in constant contact with. We also need to remember and be thankful for the work from the Department of Public Health, Dr. Catherine Brown, Jeremiah Hay, and Elizabeth Larson. We also, leading this charge is members from the Shaw Foundation, which is Jill Shaw and Ross Wilson. And lessons learned from 3 districts who have already initiated pool testing very successfully in their districts. And what we have learned is that it was a slow, gradual rollout, that the initial participation was low, I believe around 40 to 50% in each of the 3 districts listed there, where they are now at the point where they are at about 80% participation in each respective district. So many lessons learned that if we choose to go down this path, we can model here in the Taunton Public Schools, as we'll incorporate their best practices into whatever we decide to do. The other piece that I should also mention, in a conversation I had with the newly elected Congressman Jake Auchincloss, what's being recommended for school systems by the new administration is pool testing in collaboration or in conjunction with vaccinations of staff. So what they are recommending is that staff be vaccinated and that school systems inquire about pool testing to provide the safest in-person learning environments for our students and staff. So I won't read verbatim from the slide because I think I've kind of covered much of this already with my initial introduction. So what DESE is working on a large scale, and I'll get into it later in the presentation, is to provide us with the tools and resources, knowing that many school systems, urban systems, rural, suburban systems, lack the resources to successfully carry out pool testing in our school system. So schools districts across the state have been working very hard, and I'm very proud of the measures that we put in place. And we have achieved 4 air changes per hour in all our classrooms throughout the Taunton Public Schools. We have brought highly advanced technology to support our remote and hybrid learning plans. So the next piece is to continue to look for ways and means to provide safety within our schools, in addition to the measures we've already put in place for air quality. So COVID-19 testing in K-12 schools is an additional mitigation strategy. And again, additional. What we are doing here in Taunton continues to work. This would put, if we choose to go down this path, it would provide an additional layer of support and safety. Next slide, please, Steve. So what DESE is offering at no cost to school systems is a 6-week period of districts who wish to participate in pool testing. School systems would receive test kits. We would receive support from testing service providers, as well as testing software at no cost for the first 6 weeks. So the initial phase is set to kick off the week of January, or I believe the week of February 8th is when the state is set to start their initial 6-week program, would be February 8th, and it would conclude on March 28th. So there'd be no cost to any school system if they chose to do this pilot program. And if a school system did choose to do the pilot program, I'll explain how that would work out later in the presentation. So again, following the initial 6-week launch, districts and schools may continue using pool testing by purchasing the tests from any of the accompanying test materials and software from a statewide contract using our stimulus funding, so it would meet all procurement obligations. In districts and schools not participating in the 6-week launch, so if we choose not to participate in the 6-week launch, that would still not prevent us from doing something on our own, utilizing the state contract. What's advantageous about the 6-week launch is that it allows school systems to work out all the bugs, to learn all the logistics before taking it over on their own, or we may choose, if they choose, may continue to contract with service providers. So I want to be very clear. As I mentioned at our last presentation, my concern is adding additional work to our already overworked nursing staff, to our already overworked principals and administrators who are working very hard to support hybrid learning with boots on the ground. So what we are exploring here at the Taunton Public Schools, and the state has not released its menu of options yet, is we want to know what options will be available to us, and we want to know the cost. So again, after the 6 weeks, we can choose to go 5 weeks on our own with using the state contract. We can choose to go 10 weeks or the remainder of the school year. That'll be at our discretion, utilizing the state contract, which will be in effect for the rest of the fiscal year. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clearly articulated. Thank you, Steve. So districts that are invited to participate have to meet the following criteria. So we do meet the criteria because we are in hybrid. So we check that box, but it also is available to other districts who are not in hybrid or districts that are choosing to go into hybrid. And again, this is only for public schools only. And what's also nice about this program is that students and staff are eligible to participate in the pool testing, not just students. So again, it's another layer of security and support that we can provide students, families, and staff. Next slide, please, Steve. So I think I went into this at the last presentation, what involves pool testing, and I probably should have done a better job during the presentation last school committee meeting, when we talked about cohorts A and B being pool tested. We would also pool test students in cohort C, which attend school 4 days a week. So if we do enter into pool testing, all students, again, all students, cohorts A, B, and C, attending in-person learning would be eligible to participate in pool testing. Pool testing involves mixing 10 to 25 samples or swabs in a batch or a pool, and then testing that pool with a PCR test. The test is performed once per week with an anterior nasal swab using the short swab. So again, I want to stress, this is the short swab that would go along the anterior of the nasal passage, not the one that some people may have experienced that goes a little further deeper up that nasal cavity. And samples can be delivered within 24 to 48 hours. And the samples can be administered by any trained school staff. Again, I want to reiterate, what we are exploring is hiring or utilizing the menu of option to have a vendor oversee this from start to finish. I believe that would be the most feasible and the most reliable for this to be done successfully, so that we can learn and anticipate what we could take over if we choose to do this. Students in certain age groups can take their own samples with the appropriate supervision. So again, the older the student, most likely they could do it. If a student chose not to, then a medical professional or a trained professional would do the swab and provide the sample, collect the sample. Next slide, please, Steve. Thank you. So if a pool test is negative, then all individuals within the pool are presumed negative and they remain in school. If a pool test is positive, then all individuals in the pool are retested individually. This is referred to as reflex testing. So the Abbott Binax Now rapid point of care antigen test will be the primary source for the individual follow-up testing. In a rare event that a positive pool yields all negative individual Binax Now tests, all individuals from the positive pool may be required to take an additional individual PCR test. Next slide, please, Steve. So what does the state contract provide? The state contract includes onboarding and continuing training, lab processing, secure tech system, and customer support. What districts would be responsible for, but again, the state is working to provide coverage for these services, is coordination and direct administration of the program, overseeing ongoing operations, and conducting follow-up tests on the positive pools. Next slide, please, Steve. So the statewide contract for pool testing comes at an approximate cost of $5 per swab. That is greatly reduced from about a month ago when I first learned about pool testing, where they were talking about costs as high as $15, $20, $25 per swab. So that is greatly reduced, and that's because of the fact that by doing the pool testing, you're administering one test with multiple samples. So that greatly reduces the cost. The testing service providers will manage the following. So again, operations and logistics, delivery of the test to the schools, the testing hardware, the tubes, the labels, etc., coordination and communication with the testing laboratory, the software, the training, and also customer service and support. Next slide, please, Steve. In most cases, districts and schools will rely on their own in-district personnel or contracted providers to complete the following services. So again, I want to stress to the committee and to the public, on a call last week with 2 other area superintendents, we all echoed the same sentiment. Our people are working very hard to put one more layer or one more ask on them we believe would be detrimental, especially something that is new and something that we want to roll out and make sure is successful. So we are continuing to lobby and ask for additional support. Again, I'll call it boots on the ground to help us oversee, administer, and carry out, this process in a very thoughtful, efficient manner. Next slide, please, Steve. So if a district or school lacks the internal capacity, this kind of goes to what I was just mentioning. So they can provide on-site testing, coordination, and a manager, and they also can provide transportation to deliver these samples to and from the labs. I won't go into the detail on the bullets because you've had the presentation and opportunity to review. And if you do have any questions once we conclude the presentation, I'll be happy to refer to any slide that you have a question on. Next slide, please, Steve. So the proper authorization and consent, I want to also emphasize that this is an opt-in, opt-out. Parents do not have to have their child participate in this program if they are in cohort A, B, or C. So again, it's a choice. As I mentioned, from Salem, Medford, and Watertown, the participation rate was very low in the beginning, 40, 50%. But over a period of time, via word of mouth, it's up to nearly 80% participation. So again, this is something that we believe that if we did implement, we would roll out slow in order to go fast. And there would be no negative repercussions for students or staff who chose not to participate in the pool testing. And what's also nice is that a lot of the forms and a lot of the documents that we will be utilizing have already been vetted and have already been created. Next slide, please, Steve. And then follow up for pool testing for positive pools. So districts and schools must have a process to individually test students in positive pools. So this is something that must be established before being granted access to participate in this program. I've already mentioned that the Abbott Binex Now Rapid Point of Care Antigen Test will be the primary source of this individual follow-up testing. And districts and schools should consider where the follow-up testing will take place. And as we've learned from best practices, a centralized location has proven to be the most effective. Next slide, please, Steve. And then the next steps, which we will be taking, and I've already taken step 1. I did complete an initial survey, and I will be attending upcoming calls with Lauren Rue and other members from DESE and the Shaw Foundation, as well as the DPH, to learn more about what the menu of services will be available to us. We will assess in-district resources to determine which services will be purchased from the statewide contract. So again, I'm still awaiting that menu. DESE will send the final approval to those who have confirmed their participation, and support for prerequisites beginning immediately. So once we are in, DESE and others will check to make sure that we have everything needed in place to successfully carry out this pool testing. So with that, that concludes this portion of the presentation, and I would welcome any questions or concerns that you may have regarding this that I can answer. And if I can't answer your questions, I will gladly write them down and ask them at the upcoming meetings with the Shaw Foundation and members from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. Are there any questions from the members before you accept the report? Mr. DeMello and then Mr. Pulowski.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Mr. Cabral. This 15 pages worth of slides are actually beautiful, well done, and I hope it would work as simple as presented. Just to give you a comparison, at the university, we regularly test approximately 1,500 residential students and staff, and the logistics involved in setting up the center, because there was a mention of conditions of circulation of air and all this other stuff that takes place when performing the swab, whether the small nasal swab that we're considering here. and separation from other folks and so on. I don't know how we're going to pull this off to begin on February 8th. I mean, we're talking, what, 18 days away? And, again, I've been wearing this hat since August of last year at the university, and I'm talking 1,500. We're talking 8,000. Even if it's 50% participation rate, we're talking 4,000, not including staff. So I just don't know how we're going to pull this off to start on February 8th. I want this to start yesterday, and I'm in total agreement of this, but there's a lot of questions to be answered. And again, I'm not blaming you, Superintendent, but when it comes down from the state and they say, act on this, they don't support us. We need to have support mechanisms in place. This is not something that is done overnight. So again, these questions have to be answered. I did get the PowerPoint. I haven't had a chance because we started working on Monday with returning students from out of state and so forth. I am putting down a whole list for you to ask the people that need to be asked the questions.
Yeah, if I could,
Sure,
I'm sorry,
Mr.
Mr. Miller, if you're done, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Cabral, did you want to respond?
Yeah, that's fine, Mary. Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to make sure you were done, Mr. DeMello.
Yeah, that's it,
Yeah.
That's
So
it.
I should have also mentioned that we do not have to start on February 8th. So, and I agree. And again, my major concern is being able to successfully coordinate and manage this. And that's what I have, that's what myself and two other superintendents echoed to Congressman Jake Auchincloss, is that we need support, boots on the ground to help administer this. So I agree with you 110%. So what we did learn is, again, we do not have to start on February 8th. Anytime between February 8th and March 29th would be at no cost to the school department, or no cost to any school district that enters into this. So we do have time to thoroughly prepare if we go down this road. The other piece, what I didn't put in the presentation, was what was learned and what was shared from Watertown, Medford, and Salem. So what was very successful was the on-the-cart approach. So what they had in Salem, and they've offered for us to come in and observe how this is administered, in which we may, is they have trained professionals going classroom to classroom with their carts to collect the sample. So that is how they are able to manage it. And what they stated at first, a little clunky, took a little bit of time, but now that they are well into the process, it takes about 5 minutes a classroom to collect the samples. Because again, depending on the age of the student, some students will do the sampling or collect the sample themselves and give it to the trained professional. So I agree, Mr. DeMello, there are a lot of questions to ask. I don't believe many school systems who put so much time and effort into the mitigation strategies to make sure we had sufficient airflow and to make sure we had robust learning platforms. And we lack the resources right now. And that's why we continue to say we need more support if the state wants this, to work the way they imagine it working. So I echo your sentiment 110%. And selfishly, Greg, sorry, Mr. DeMello, I welcome those questions because you've been doing this at a higher level. So I want to make sure that we ask the right questions and that we're covered here at TPS.
Mayor, if I may, I'm sorry, I forgot to add this thought. And we do this in a centralized location. Everybody comes to us. We're not going classroom to classroom or building to building, which we have 12. And what they just told you about 5 minutes to collect this is hogwash. You can tell them I said that. That's impossible. There's an intake, there's a label that has to be put on the tube, there's the actual swabs fall on the floor, or they're not done properly, they have to be supervised. So 5 minutes for a classroom isn't going to happen. And I conclude my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. DeMello.
With all due respect, Mr. DeMello, that came from Superintendent of Salem. And I have to take him at his word as he is.
Oh, no, yeah, I understand that, but you can tell him I said that, okay? If you need to, you can quote me. Thank you.
I don't think I will.
Thank you. Mr. Pulowski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. So I guess I have two questions. So the first question would be, if we did not start the program on February 8th, would that mean that we would be missing out on some of the free weeks? Like, is it only that period of time? Okay.
Yeah, so only from February 8th to March 29th will it be free. So if we do nothing over that 6-week period and then choose to do something on Monday, March 29th, we begin paying for it.
Oh, okay. So if we were, so it would be in our best interest to try to be ready by February 8th so we could get the maximum benefit of the free
Yeah,
time.
I mean, I would think I think realistically sometime in February. Try to be ready sometime in February, if not early March.
All right. So then that leads me to my next question is, who is actively working on the logistics of the plan for Taunton Public Schools? Do you have like a team together?
So right now I have been in communication with Mrs. Perry. I've been in communication with Nurse Manager Regan. And what I want to see is the menu of options that are available to us. So once we know the menu of options, if they are going to provide staff that we can assign to buildings to collect the samples, they're going to provide additional supports, again, the boots on the ground, I think it would be advantageous for us to explore that first before asking one more ask of our staff. So I would look to purchase a soup to nuts program utilizing the state menu.
Okay. And they would then provide like the logistics, like I like just general questions like what defines a pool? Is it every individual classroom? And then if it is a classroom and you're testing cohort A, B, and C, would that necessarily mean that the cohort C children are being tested twice because they're technically in the pool with A and with B?
No, we would test each pool separately. So cohort A students would be tested in their classroom or the group that they travel with. Cohort C would be tested with their cohort that they're with, and cohort B would be tested with their cohorts. High school would be a little trickier because there is some mingling. Elementary and middle school works well because they are pretty much contained to the same pool of students. High school gets a little dicey.
Okay.
All set, Mr. Pulaski?
Yep, that's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Doherty?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just through you to the superintendent. So it seems to me, Superintendent, that what I'd like to hear from you is an emphatic, this is important for us to do. And then the way in which that implementation takes place is where the rubber hits the road. But I would feel more comfortable if I hear you saying, this is what I want to do, and then continue on with some of the aspects that you've said that we need to do this and we need to do that and we need to do that. Because to me, that's intentional. It's not finding out whether or not we can do the implementation and then saying that we want to do it. If we're moving down the road of trying to solve a problem, we've spent some considerable time and some considerable resources creating environments within our schools that we believe are healthy environments and safe environments for all of our children. And you delineated some of that already. So to hear you say, this is what we really need to do, let's figure out how we get it done, would provide some level of comfort to me anyway, knowing that we're moving down that path.
Yeah, so if I haven't come out, well, let me preface by saying this. I think everything that we have done as a leadership team and as a district has emphasized health, safety, and engagement. So when I make this presentation, shame on me for assuming that you guys know that I'm doing this because it centers on the health and safety of our students. So when I share this presentation with you, I don't do so just for the fact that I'm looking to kill time or occupy time. This is something that I believe is important, but I'm also realistic. I also know, as Mr. DeMello mentioned, we have about 4,700 kids attending in hybrid. If this is successful and word of mouth spreads, more parents may choose to send their kids to school. So that means we're going to need the capacity to test more kids. So what I don't want to see happen is that we launch a program that we're not prepared to launch and then have it result in students who are positive for COVID coming to school because we didn't have the capacity. So I believe this is a very important measure in addition to the vaccination to provide our school system with the safest learning environment for our students, which may result in more students coming back to school with the measures and protocols we currently have in place, and also provide another layer of safety for our teachers with the vaccination to ensure that they are working in safe learning environments. So again, anything that we can do, and I think I've demonstrated to this committee, I won't shy away from doing anything that I believe will support and provide us with a robust learning platform. And I won't shy away from spending money wisely to provide us with a safe learning environment. So I think this is the next logical step that we need to begin exploring. And as I have more information, I will share with you because I believe we need to make an informed decision. So again, this is important. This is the next step along with the vaccination to ensure that we can maintain our hybrid learning model and sustain our hybrid learning model for the duration of the school year. So we just came out of remote the last 2 weeks. We were all gung-ho to come back last week, but listening to our medical officials, I made a tough decision, a last-minute decision, which impacted many families, knowing that it was in the best interest and it was centered on health, safety, and engagement. And we will continue to explore all opportunities, all means, and continue to emphasize health, safety, and engagement. We will not do anything knowingly putting people, our students, at harm's way. So I believe this is very important, but I also want to make sure, like anything we do in Taunton, that we do it right.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. Mrs. Doherty, are you?
Yes, I just, to my colleagues through you, Mayor, or to the superintendent, do you feel, superintendent, so I hear a yes. Do you feel that you need a motion and support from the school committee to at least go down that pathway? So the motion would be to pursue along the lines that you have described the idea of engaging in pool testing as offered by the Department of Education. We would have that on record rather than just leaving it in the ether.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel more comfortable providing you with more information and providing you with a plan once I've had a chance to look at the menu of options and talk to our nursing professionals and talk to the people who are operating operations and logistically to put together a thoughtful plan that we believe makes sense, knowing who's going to be supervising what, who's going to be responsible for what, and because the big piece too is the contact tracing. So when someone tests positive, we got to make a lot of phone calls. So allow me time to continue exploring this. And if we don't start on February 8th, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cabral. Mrs. Fagan?
Oh, wait a minute, yeah. Mr. Cabral, once you establish a pool of students in any given room, we don't have a lot of kids right now anyway in the classrooms, right?
Correct.
So you're talking about 10 students?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the averages at my fingertips right now, but I see Mr. Barata. I think you were nodding your head, Chris. So I think we average probably between 8 to 12 in some classes on average. So it would be a small pool.
That would always be the pool. That would be a non-changing pool. That becomes an established pool. So it'll be the same 10, 12 or whatever kids in that pool.
Correct.
So you're not going to mix, so you always know what you're dealing with. How often would you test them, Mr. Cabral?
Every week.
Every week, okay.
Every week.
Yeah, because sometimes they get it afterwards and then you've already tested. Have you had any concerns about, like, I believe it was Elon Musk took 4 tests, 2 said he was positive, 2 said he was negative. What's your opinion, or what have you heard about the reliability of how they're testing?
Great question, Mrs. Fagan. So because we're using the PCR test, I'm not sure what, even though I'm a big follower of Elon Musk, I'm not sure what kind of test he was taking, but I do know that the PCR test is the most accurate test. And I also have learned from our medical experts on the calls I've attended that the Abbott or the Binex Abbott antigen test is also very reliable.
So you don't know which one you're using then?
We will be using a PCR test for the initial test. So a PCR, interior nasal, and then the Binex Abbott antigen test will be for the follow-up test.
Yeah, I'm continuously amazed when I hear about people going in and the tests are all over the place. And I just heard another one recently. So that's my only concern with that. I don't want to cause undue alarm if something's not quite right, but thank you.
I agree.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan. Mr. Martin?
I appreciate the comments that my colleague made about the university with the logistics. So I won't go back into that. But my question is if we were to move into this program after the initial period, could we use CARES money to fund it?
I would recommend we use CARES money. So as you know, we're still sitting on some of the original CARES funding. We have some additional CARES funding that we are eagerly awaiting that we should be receiving soon. And again, Mr. Martin, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It would be approximately 10 weeks that the Taunton Public Schools, if we chose to. Again, we could do 5 weeks, we could do 3 weeks, or we could start out slow, 5 weeks, and then after 5 weeks, assess and say, do we want to continue for another 5 weeks? So we do have that, and depending on what the numbers are with the state and depending on what the numbers are in the city, we may say 5 weeks is enough. It got us through a certain period. We feel comfortable, or we may say, let's do the full 10 weeks. But the good news is the state contracts and the vendors will be there for us to utilize. And if we feel that we can take over some of these procedures or some of these mechanisms, then we can choose to take them over and do it ourselves at no cost.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Okay, is there a motion to accept the superintendent's report?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Motion made and seconded to accept the report. On a roll call, Mrs. Fagan? Oh, you want to do it on, oh, great. No, we'll do it on a voice vote, huh? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, so voted. Thank you. Administrative business? Anything in the staffing report?
Received and placed on file.
Second.
Madam Mayor,
Motion made and seconded on discussion, Mrs. Doherty.
thank you. Just a couple of questions. I see that there are a couple of new positions listed here: transportation proctor, elementary school itinerant literacy, and math tutor. So I'm wondering where the job descriptions are. Did that come up in an MOU in negotiation, or is the job description in the making? I haven't seen anything as at this point.
Yeah, we don't have, the tutors already exist. That's already a position that's existed in the Taunton Public Schools. What was the second position?
Well, it's transportation proctor and elementary school itinerant literacy and or math tutor. So you're saying that one already exists?
Yeah, the tutors and the itinerants already exist. The only position that's new is something that we bargained during our COVID plan with the TEA, was the transportation proctor, to provide additional support to our principals at the end of the day, knowing that the dismissal procedures are very different this year, and just to make sure students are supervised and to make sure students have space. So we didn't provide a job description because that already exists in some capacity through volunteers. So this is a way to ensure that we have volunteers who are helping out after school to monitor our students and get them on the buses safely, especially if the buses are running late and beyond the contractual workday. We have supervision to watch the students until their bus arrives, until their transportation arrives.
So just, Madam Mayor, if I might, it might be well to, at the very least, have a paragraph of description of what that job is, so that we would have it on file going forward. And it should come to the rules subcommittee. So should give it some thought, Superintendent.
Yeah, if it's something that I mean, again, it's only COVID related for this year. If it's something that we see being a long-term, I would definitely develop a job description so that we have clear guidelines and expectations. But because COVID is so fluid, we chose not to. But again, it's something that it's for COVID only, to provide eyes and supervision on our kids. But if it's something that's gonna be long-term, we will definitely put something together.
Thank you. So there's a motion and a second to receive and place on file. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, so voted. Subcommittee reports, Finance and Law Subcommittee, Mr. Martin.
Finance and Law Subcommittee met this afternoon at 4 p.m. And the reason for the 4 p.m. was to coincide with the due dates, the due times for the opening of bus bids. In attendance were myself, Mr. Souza, and Mr. Fiore, also Mr. Cabral and Ms. Moynihan, and several other members of the school committee. We did have some vendors in the audience, also obviously bus personnel, and I don't have their names, but they were there to oversee the proceedings. The first item on the agenda was student activities, which there weren't any. The second item on the agenda was the bid openings. So we had one bid from Bloom. I opened the bid. I handed it to Mr. Rich. Last name Labrie. Okay, and earlier the first name escaped me. This is what happens when you get old. And he went through the bid to make sure it was properly submitted with the proper documents, and it was. So a motion was made by Mr. Souza, seconded by Mr. Fiore, to refer the bid to administration for review and recommendation. And that was pretty much it as far as the bus bid go. There was only, as I say, one bid. The next item was an update from Ms. Monahan on the FY21 line budget, FY21 revolving accounts, and FY21 grants. There were several questions which Ms. Monahan answered, and that was a motion was made to receive and place on file. And finally, there was a bills payable. There were two bills payable. One was for FY20 in the amount of $2,085, and the other one was for FY21, and that was $628,254.02 for a total bills payable of $630,000, $399.02. Again, that was $630,339.02, and that was approved by the Finance and Law Subcommittee unanimously. And lastly, Ms. Monahan gave a quick update on facilities. PPE continues to be distributed amongst our schools. Custodians use Wednesday for a thorough cleaning, but also there are cleaning during the week, also during the other days. And maybe Mr. Cabral could address this, and that is the heating at the Mulcahy Middle School.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. So there have been some ongoing lingering heating concerns with stabilizing the heat consistently throughout the new Mulcahy School. So today was a remote day. So we utilized this day to have HVAC technicians who are contracted through the project to go through the building from start to finish, leave no nook and cranny untouched, to identify which areas were not receiving adequate or sustained heating. So I have a meeting scheduled with Mrs. Moynihan this Friday with all the contractors and our OPM, our Owner's Project Manager, to discuss the findings, and then also to continue to inquire what is the timeline as far as ensuring that that building, which is right now the crown jewel of Taunton Public Schools, that building is heated appropriately. So a lot of the initial findings from the meeting that were shared with me and others, it appears that they have a handle. They realize what the issues are, but they wanted to go through at our urging to make sure that they have done a thorough inspection again, so that therefore when all the contractors, as Mr. Martin, you'll recall, when the contractors leave, that it doesn't become an issue that we need to resolve. We want to make sure that the building is operating and functioning the way it was intended to do. So I should have, or Mrs. Moynihan should have an update after our meeting on Friday. And I'm very optimistic that they will have this matter resolved successfully.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. Just a couple of other issues. One regarding the bus bid. Mr. Souza did ask that a copy of the bus bid be made available to all school committee members in electronic format. So you'll be getting a copy of the bus bid and the review and recommendation once Mr. Labrie has done his due diligence. And the other issue that came up was from Mr. Fiore regarding the library books at the Mulcahy School. And I believe, Mr. Cabral, you have an answer for that also.
Yep. So prior to Christmas break, I believe Mr. Barada had been working with our librarian at Taunton High School to put together a plan to begin shelving the books that are at the Mulcahy School. So I'll have Mr. Barada provide us with an update on where we are with that work, because we're very eager to get the books out of the boxes and onto the shelves in the very near future.
Thank you. And that's the report of the Finance and Law Subcommittee.
Motion, we accept the report and adopt the recommendations of the subcommittee.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. On discussion, Mr. DeMello, Mrs. Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I was also disappointed that we only received one bid back for the transportation services. Not disappointed as the Bloom Company, because the Bloom Company is a local company, employs many folks that live in our city and know our kids best, the routes and families. But what I am disappointed in is that we spent, I believe, up to $10,000 to hire a consultant that only returned one bid back to us, which I was very adamant about, saying that we could have done that in-house and with minor touch-ups regarding COVID situations, we could have saved ourselves $10,000. That's my only disappointment. Not disappointed that Bloom Company is the only company bidding, because I'm not going to repeat what I just said. They are a local company. And if it's appropriate this time, I would like to vote present on page 5. Voucher number 14991 in the amount of $648.
Thank you, Mr. DeMello. Mrs. Doherty?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm looking at the quarterly report. So this is the end of the second quarter, meaning 50% along the way. And I'm looking at 3 line items that are over the 50% mark: 2340, 2430, and 4400. So are we worried about those line items, particularly 4400, which is expended at the level of 82.90%? We're only just slightly halfway through the halfway mark. So, I mean, I know what the answer is, that it balances out at the end of the year, but
I think Ms. Moynihan would be able to answer that. We talked about a few of these, probably these line items. So,
thank you.
Madam Mayor, through you, I think Ms. Moynihan would be able to answer a few of those questions, Ms. Doherty.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was gonna.
Go ahead.
You want me? Well, I was gonna say, I would say no, that I'm not concerned right at this stage. I think Mrs. Moynihan, I think you kind of alluded to it, Mrs. Doherty, that typically we'd be around 50% expended. Mrs. Moynihan, at this time last year, what did we have expended in our budget?
We were a little over 50% of our budget. So compared to last year, and of course, where we are this year, we're very good standings.
So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, Mrs. Doherty, you'll notice that we've expended 34% of our budget. And typically we're over 50% at this stage. So I'm fairly optimistic that we will, as we normally do, or Mrs. Moynihan will come to you in third quarter, asking to make some adjustments in the line item to move any surplus that we have to lines that are in deficit. So I'm not too concerned at this stage, but obviously we do watch those lines very carefully. It doesn't mean we're gonna spend frivolously. I'll let Mrs. Moynihan comment on any lines that she wishes to as well.
Just if I might follow on 4400, I thought that the CARES money helped to support the technology that we are using.
I'll let Brenda answer that one, because I believe she answered that during the Finance and Law Subcommittee meeting.
Thank you, Superintendent Cabral. So yes, we do have some of our CARES money did go ahead and help us with the expenses of technology. And as we go ahead and receive additional CARES money, we'll be able to apply some of those monies to specific line items. But I do, as you are saying, the 4400, which is technology maintenance and supplies. Honestly, by this time, we should be seeing that we should have purchased just about what we've needed. But again, I'm not sure where we will be in the next month or two. But usually at this time, you would see your contracts being paid out for your 4400. Just like your supplies, your teaching classroom supplies at this time, we would be pretty much set for the rest of the school year. But again, we will be looking at what we receive for additional CARES funding coming up and being able to apply those funds to specific line items in our budget.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor, Mrs. Moynihan, Superintendent.
You're welcome.
If I could add one more piece that Mrs. Moynihan, I think is important to know, because she brought up a good point. So because we are where we are in the school year, we're almost into February, and we should have purchased pretty much everything that schools will need up to this point. We're probably looking at freezing our budget shortly so that we can begin drawing down on our encumbrances in identifying what we will have for a surplus, or if we will have funding or funds for a surplus. So, and again, not to say that we're not going to buy items that we need. If we need more wipes, we need more desks, we'll buy them. But as of now, we're probably looking at freezing things and scrutinizing purchases a little more than we normally would as we begin to start closing things out.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. So there is a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. Fiore, Mr. Martin.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I could also say, having spent 13 years on the Finance and Law Committee, that there are certain line items that are more or less seasonal in nature as to when they get spent. And so some things are going to get spent more earlier in the year, some later, others can be spread out. Then there are other items like legal, for example, where you can't know consistently because the expenditure comes up as it comes up. There's a particular circumstance. So it's not unusual to see things with different percentages. It really depends on what the line item is and when it's needed.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore. Mr. Martin?
The issue of only having one bid did come up in discussion amongst a couple of subcommittee members. And the response that Mr. Labrie gave was, we had, I believe it was 8 or 9 people at the pre-bid conference. And some of those people were in the Zoom, even though they didn't submit a bid. So it's hard to determine why people would take the time, go to a pre-bid conference, listen, and then sit in on a Zoom meeting when they had not even submitted a bid. It's hard to predict who does what regarding bidding. I know from my experience with bids, and this is both with the TMLP and with the school committee, I've seen where we've had a dozen bids submitted and we'll open them and there's no bid. And you wonder why. Why did they go through the effort of getting something sent to them, printed up, submitted, open up the envelope, and there's no bid? And it's just hard to, put a reason as to why people would go through time and effort and yet not do anything. So I just wanted to make that comment because it did come up in discussion amongst the group.
Yeah, and the other thing I would also mention to Mr. Martin is the management and the fact that Mr. Labrie has a very strong reputation for drawing of bidders to meetings and to pre-bidders meetings. So knowing that there's the potential for multiple bidders is very advantageous for the school department to get a very reasonable bid. So I'm not going to comment on the bid results now. I'll wait till he's done his due diligence and I've had a chance to look at all the costs associated with the bid. But upon initial glance, I think we're going to be pleased based on the end result.
Thank you. Mr. Souza, are you all set?
The only thing I was going to say is, Mr. Labrie, I asked that question. Mr. Labrie will be doing his due diligence and he will be coming back with a report stating why, there's only one bid or what happened with that and the pluses and the minuses and recommendations on that. So we'll get a full report on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. So looks like we're all ready to vote.
Roll call vote, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Motion made and seconded. On a roll call vote, please, Mrs. Fagan.
Yep. Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Pulowski?
Yes.
Mr. Fiore?
Yes.
Mrs. Fagan votes yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida?
Yes.
Mr. DeMello?
Yes.
And Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Thank you. Nurses Subcommittee, Mrs. Fagan.
Yes, the nurses subcommittee met on Tuesday evening, the 19th. Myself, Mr. DeMello, and oh my goodness.
Who's that?
Mr. Pulowski.
I pulled a complete blank, Mr. Pulowski. I'm so sorry. And we had a discussion with Nurse Reagan about how they are implementing the contact tracing, which some of it is occurring over the weekend, and how they've utilized the nurses and the sub-nurses to be a part of that whole thing. So it was a very interesting discussion, but it is something they're paying great attention to, and it was mostly an update on what they were we're doing over the weekend. And there were no votes taken.
Motion to accept the report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the report. On a roll call, please, Mrs. Fagan?
Yes. Mrs. Doherty,
Yes?
Mr. Pulowski,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Mrs. Fagan votes yes. Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida,
yes,
Mr. DeMello,
Yes.
and Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Thank you. New business, the school calendar. Mr. Cabral, do you have any comments on that, or is that just informational?
No, I'd actually like Mrs. Perry to share with you what she shared with the teachers' unions and the 5 other bargaining units and the feedback we received and the recommendation that we'll be making.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I believe you have the copies of the 3 calendars in your packet. As you can see, option 1 and option 3 are very closely related. We always do an option that begins before Labor Day and an option that begins after Labor Day. As you know, we can't begin school until August 29th. So option 1 has our convocation on the 30th, our professional day on the 31st, and the first day for students on September 1st. If you look at option 1, the only difference between option 1 and option 3 is the month of December. So option 1 had December 22nd as an early release, which then created our last day of school on Monday, June 20th. Option 3 begins on the same September 1st. And if you, again, look at December, it is December 23rd as an early release, therefore making our last day of school Friday, June 17th. Option 2, as you can see, begins after Labor Day. So the first day for students, grades 1 through 12, would be September 7th, which would then create the last day of school for Wednesday, June 22nd. So I sent all 3 calendars out to all of our unions, and I heard back from the nurses union, the TESA union, and the TEA. All 3 of those unions opted for option 3. I also spoke to TAA, and they really didn't have a preference on either one. And as far as the custodians and food service, I didn't hear back. So the 3 unions that did respond all opted for option 3.
Thank you, Mrs. Perry.
Thank you, Mrs. Perry. So I would ask if the committee is comfortable that a motion be made to adopt option 3 as the FY22 calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. On a roll call vote, please.
Doherty,
Yes?
Mr. Pulowski,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Mrs. Fagan votes yes. Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida,
yes,
Mr. DeMello,
Yes.
and Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Thank you. Unfinished business. We have job descriptions.
It would be a roll call vote as a 3rd reading. So moved.
Second.
Second. Motion made and seconded. On a roll call, please, Mrs. Fagan.
Ms. Doherty,
Are we doing both at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. Yes?
Yeah.
Mr. Pulowski,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes on the technician and present on the liaison.
okay. Mrs. Fagan votes yes. Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida,
yes,
Mr. DeMello,
Yes.
and Mr. Souza.
Yes.
The motion's pass. Thank you. Virtual school committee retreat. We doing
You
anything
want,
with that?
you want to do that, Mr. You want me to do that, Mr. Cabral, or you want to do it?
I'll be happy to. So Mr. Souza and I have been working on coordinating a virtual school committee retreat. So we have reached out to a facilitator to work with us. So we had talked about doing two parts, having a section that would be led by students, and then having a piece that would be, for the school committee group to continue working as a high functioning team. So we have secured a facilitator. Unfortunately, he is only available to work with us on February 24th, which I believe is an off Wednesday. So as long as anyone has no objections to that date, we'll meet on February 24th to have our virtual retreat. Our facilitator will be meeting with Mr. Souza and I to talk about framing the topics that we want to be discussed. The facilitator, unlike past facilitators, wants to spend some time speaking to each school board member to talk to you and learn about different topics that you wish to discuss, and just kind of talk about things that are of concern to you that we can bring up. So I find this to be a little more advantageous, because unlike past facilitators who come in cold, not knowing the committee, this person will have a little background on all of us, which I think will lead to a very meaningful session. And I'm hoping, and I believe this will springboard to future sessions with the facilitator who can guide us in our work. So February 24th, I would assume that we would meet at the same time, 6 o'clock, due to work commitments. If we can meet sooner, I would entertain that now, but I believe some of us have work commitments, so we'd have to stick to 6. But if we could meet a little earlier, 5:30, I would welcome that up. I would welcome that discussion now. But if not, we'll keep it at 6. Did I miss anything, Mr. Souza?
No, I think you did well.
Mr. DeMello and I think Mrs. Doherty.
Yeah.
Mayor, I would accommodate to change my schedule if my colleagues would like to start earlier, let's say 4 o'clock. Because this can run pretty late and I'd rather start early than finish.
Yeah, well, he says 2 hours should be enough, but you're right.
2
Mr.
hours.
Cabral. Yeah, he said 2 hours should be enough, but
Could I suggest 5 p.m. then?
yeah, we can, we'll be in touch, and I think we'll meet, if you are willing to start a little earlier, we'll be in touch about changing it a little bit earlier, and just before we even schedule a time, we'll have Mr. Cabral or myself will be in touch to poll the people that have conflicts at that time.
Yeah, and I would still like to do something with the students. So we do have something planned.
Yeah, we have a couple of ideas up our sleeve for that too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeMello. Mrs. Doherty?
I'm sorry, just a question. I might have missed it, Madam Mayor, the name of the person who is the facilitator?
Yeah, I didn't share that important piece, did I?
Yeah.
It's, Anthony
And
Bent.
what is he or she connected to?
Anthony Bent. I believe Anthony Bent is affiliated with both the MASS and MASC. I'd have to double check on MASC, Carol, Mr. Doherty.
Okay, we all set on that? No further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I did not see you down there, Mrs. Almeida. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I might be the only one that doesn't agree with this, but this is a school committee retreat. We have a high school subcommittee that addresses issues with the students. I don't know if it's necessary to have students at our retreat. I mean, if you want to have them come to a regular school committee meeting, that's something else, but it's our retreat that's supposed to be our enrichment. So I don't know if I'm really in favor of having the students at a retreat like that, because it's enrichment to the school committee.
If I could, so what we anticipated having, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet. So if you don't mind, I will communicate individually with the school board regarding the student component, and then we can make a decision. Because again, there's a few moving parts that I need to communicate with to make sure that we can do this in a very thoughtful and innovative. And I also want the board to be engaged and to learn from our kids. Again, with what we have planned. So I don't disagree with you, Mrs. Almeida, but I also look at the advisory a little differently. That's where we ask students to bring their concerns to us so that we can make changes and have policy to improve conditions in our schools. what we're planning is a little different.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral.
Okay.
Are you all set, Mrs. Almeida? Okay, great. Mr. Souza?
Yes, Madam Mayor, because we're on unfinished business and action items is next, I'm just going to review the calendar. Next, the 27th, next Wednesday, is a committee of the whole meeting, and that we will be meeting with the principals to go over the preliminary start of the budget talks with the principals. So that'll be next week, and the superintendent will be in touch on the, see if there's any conflict on a time. We haven't set on the 6 o'clock. We may try to go a little bit earlier, but the superintendent will be in touch with the members on that one, and we'll set a time within the next couple of days on that. So the 27th, committee of the whole, budget with the principals. Next month, regular meeting on the 3rd. There's a typo on the back, an error on the back. We're under the upcoming meetings. There's no meeting on the 17th. That's school vacation, so strike that. And then on the 24th of February, that's our committee of the whole, and that's the retreat with our facilitator for, and that should be about 2 hours, roughly, maybe a little bit more. But he says we can get that in about 2 hours. So we'll see how good he is in that. So that's basically the next 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. Anything else on that? Mrs. Doherty?
Just one quick question about the school committee retreat. So I'm hoping that Mr. Souza, Mr. Cabral are going to reveal the agenda to us regarding how the students are going to be utilized so that we can have a sense of where that's going and whether or not we feel comfortable doing that.
This meeting on the 24th will not involve students. We're going to have a separate meeting for that. So this one here is just a facilitator on 24th. That we are planning a subsequent one, hopefully for March, with that component in it. But at that time, it's a fluid situation, so we haven't got it nailed down exactly.
I want to spend more. I want to spend more time with you guys, so we're going to have multiple retreats. Okay, Carol.
So the school committee retreat is on the 24th of February, right?
Correct.
Right.
And there are no students participating on the 24th of February. It is for us with Mr. Bent.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Very good, thank you. Okay, there is no press time, so do we have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Foskey, you have something?
Oh, I'm sorry, were we gonna go over the action item review?
Oh, I apologize, I thought there was nothing on there. I thought that was it. So yes, we could certainly do that. Mr.
Yeah,
Souza,
Yes, I don't, does anyone have any questions on the action items? Let me take a quick peek here. See if I missed anything. I don't see anything right now that we'll need to move on or off. Mr. Pulaski, do you have a question?
Yeah, so actually, my question was just in this list. I was just wondering if in this meeting or perhaps even in the next one, could we actually go through this list and get an update? Because I mean, everything just says pending and the list never seems to change. It seems like we only change it when something is done, but like, I don't know, some of these things, like at least if we just got an update that said, pending, until after COVID, or we have a general timeline, because I just think it would be worth a discussion.
Actually, I can do that pretty quick right now, Mr. Souza, because Mrs. Devine and I met on exactly that. We mapped out dates.
That's a good point, because a lot of these are COVID dependent.
Would you like me to go through it real quick on the items I can address?
Sure.
I promise to be quick. Strategic plan, I would say I'm about 60 to 70% done. So I'm trying to get that wrapped up. Believe me, I'm trying to get that wrapped up as soon as possible. So I think 9/4/19 long range plan, we need to put that on hold due to COVID. Policies, Mrs. Devine and I have talked about that. So that is something that we can work on with her and some additional support in the central office. So that is ongoing work. I don't have a date on that one yet. Summer program, I actually have half of it done. I'm just waiting on the general ed piece. I don't have an update on 8/19, the naming of the Mulcahy School. So
We can't put that on hold because of everything that's going on later on in the year. Yeah.
The community input teams, I actually met with the leadership team. We are going to shoot for the first reading in March to have summaries of all those input teams. And I did get an email from Mr. McPhail and Decca. The kids are very excited and doing some great work as far as reaching out to community organizations to donate those books to. So it's been a great learning project for the kids, and I can't wait to have them report back, on how successful they are once that's done.
Okay, great. Mr. Souza?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Colleagues, I think what I'll do is I'll have Mrs. Devine put a sentence, review it with Mr. Cabral, what he just went through, and we'll put a sentence in on the right-hand column. If it's on hold because of COVID, we'll write that in. And we'll put a sentence under each one that says where we're at in today's date of this meeting. So that way we know we've talked about it and that's where we're at with a date.
And I just want to conclude and say I appreciate everyone's patience and understanding.
Thank you. Mrs. Fagan?
Just a quick comment, Mr. Cabral. I kind of miss baking and everything for everybody. So you want me to do some virtual baking, or I can make a bunch of food and sit here with it all around me, and you can all just kind of water at the mouth.
Is that
I really do miss that.
Is that an action item? Is that going on the action items?
Certainly
Yeah.
a lot of calories with virtual baking, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no calories, Mayor O'Connell. That's why we do it. Guilt-free meetings.
Hey, just don't forget me.
Okay.
All right. Oh, Mr. Martin.
Mrs. Fagan, I do miss your cooking.
Yeah.
And I did attend the opening of the bid today in person. And I'll tell you, it was a very strange feeling to be in that building, not having been in it for a year. Very strange.
Yep. I went in today to do the thing that we have to do on the, what do you call it, thing for the state. I did it in there because I don't
Ethics.
have a printer at home. Yeah, the ethics thing. So I went down and did that, but it just, I miss seeing people. I really do. I'm a people person, and I just much rather sit in a room with all of you and talk. I miss this.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan. We all miss you too. Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed? So voted. Thank you very
Absolutely
much, everyone.
Night.
Always nice to end with a laugh. Good job, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you, Steve. Great job as usual.
Take care, Steve. Have a good week.
Everyone have a good week.